Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thanks for being here as always. We're heading into another Premier League weekend. Arsenal take on West Ham at the Emirates, our first home game of the season. Not quite the 3 o'clock kickoff. Is it 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? What the fuck is that about? Come on. I only noticed that yesterday. I just kind of assumed it was going to be like a 3 o'clock or, maybe it was the 5:30 game, but 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? What a weird time to have a game of football. I know that football is on then, but it's like, it's Spanish football time, isn't it? That's when like all the Premier League is over. You sit down and you turn on and you go, well, what game is on? And it's Real Betis against Getafe or something like that. But this is a world in which not everything is the way it used to be or the way that it was. So I suppose an 8 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday night is just part of the shit show that is the world right now. For some people, depending on where they are in the world, this will be a great kickoff time. It'll be nice in the afternoon. They can just sort of watch the game, then have their Saturday evenings. For some people, it'll be basically the middle of the night. They're going to have to do their, well, do I stay up? Or do I go to bed and get up in the middle of the night, or get up really early, depending what time zone they happen to be in? But 8 o'clock on a Saturday night seems just an odd time for me. It's like it's Monday night football time, but on a Saturday. So try and make sense of that one. I know it's probably got something to do with the fact that all the games are being televised now or whatever, but still, I'm not really on board with this, and I'd like to take this opportunity on my own platform to register my disapproval in the strongest terms possible, whilst also being aware it will make absolutely fuck all difference to anybody or anything. So there you go. Just got to get on with it. 8 o'clock Saturday evening. That is Arsenal versus West Ham. It's been a week. It's been a week in which things have happened at Arsenal. Our captain, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, has signed a new contract at last. I know people were getting a bit worried about this, but, from what I was told, it's been sort of done and agreed for quite a while, but it was just putting in place all the details. And I suppose until such time as something is officially announced, you worry, don't you, that something might go wrong? But I was never particularly that worried. It was all about when rather than if it was going to happen. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to Mikel Arteta, who wanted to keep him and wants to continue to, I suppose, build a team around him and his goal scoring, while recognizing at the same time we've got to do a little bit more in that regard from other areas of the pitch. So that's good news. We'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of moments' time. Also, a departure. Emi Martinez has gone to Aston Villa for £20 million, which is a lot of money for a second-choice goalkeeper, particularly a second-choice goalkeeper who has only really made his, I'm not going to say his breakthrough, because he made his debut in 2012, but I think he surprised some people when he came into the team to deputise for Bernd Leno. The quality and the assurance of his performances led to, I guess, good debate about who should be number one, and the decision was made, and as such, Emi decided that he really wanted to go and be a number one somewhere else, and that, of course, is something that we are going to talk about in a bit more detail now in a moment with our guest. But before we do that, just a quick chat to get some information on a couple of things. First is the goalkeeper that we're being linked with. He plays for Dijon. His name is Runar Alex Runarsson. He's an Icelandic goalkeeper. So we'll get a little bit of information about him, and also a quick chat about a transfer deal that we're hoping will happen, of course, which is Houssem Aouar from Lyon. And who better to talk about all that with than the man in France? It's Matt Spiro. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Tell me a little bit about this guy in terms of what he has done at Dijon.
Well, he joined Dijon a couple of years ago now. He's been there for 2 full seasons. He arrived with, I'd say, a good reputation as a sort of young goalkeeper who'd played international football with Iceland. And he had, in his first season, which would have been 2018-19, he was the first choice goalkeeper. He played for a Dijon side that was dreadful at the back. And he struggled, to be honest. He didn't quite manage to impose himself. he's a good, he's a good shot stopper from what I've seen of him. He's a goalkeeper who perhaps doesn't have, I would say, the presence of an Emi Martinez, and certainly if we're looking at Runarsson as a number 2 to replace Martinez, we're taking quite a big step down, because Runarsson, like I say, struggled in that season at Dijon, didn't manage to hold down his place for the second season. Alfred Gomis came in, who's a much bigger, more commanding goalkeeper, and has kept Runarsson out. So I mean, I saw in March Runarsson saying that he was keen to leave because he didn't want to be number 2, which makes this transfer slightly more puzzling as well, because clearly he's not going to Arsenal to be number 1. So listen, he's still a young enough goalkeeper to perhaps develop into a top goalkeeper, but the evidence that I've seen so far isn't that promising, to be honest.
Okay, so you say he's a good shot stopper. When you say he's not quite commanding a presence as Emi Martinez, who of course is, big and huge and very commanding and has done very well for Arsenal. I mean, are we sort of harking back to, I don't want to draw a compare, but someone like Ospina, Almunia perhaps, who was, very much a goalkeeper who played off his line rather than somebody who came out to deal with things in his own area, certainly aerially.
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, I was thinking Ospina. I mean, he's a goalkeeper who's more in the modern kind of category insofar as I think he reads the game well. I think he's good with his feet. But he's more, I'd say a better goalkeeper on his line. That's certainly the memory I have of the season he played, that he wasn't necessarily coming out and commanding the penalty area as I think Dijon needed him to. And that may be, the reason why they went and got this giant goalkeeper, Alfred Gomis, who I think 6'4" or 6'5". Runarsson is considerably smaller than that. I think 6'1". But like I say, he has qualities, and maybe Arsenal have have seen potential that I didn't necessarily see in Ligue 1.
Okay, well, I mean, he's going to hook up again with Iñaki Kenya Pavon, who was his goalkeeping coach at a club that he was in Denmark. No, is it?
Yeah, he played in Denmark.
Denmark. So it was Nordjylland. I really have fucked that up. So apologies to all of our Danish listeners for that. It's not impossible for a goalkeeper to struggle at a particular club, or for any player indeed to struggle at a particular club and then go somewhere else and have a better time, isn't it?
No, that's right. So, Arsenal clearly have done their homework. I mean, this guy hasn't played much at all in the last season. The Dijon first choice goalkeeper Gomis actually got injured just before the lockdown, and everyone thought, this will be interesting now because Runarsson will get his chance. But I think he played only 3 or 4 games before the season was curtailed. So he's not played a lot of football. Clearly he's looking for another challenge. But I'm usually very full of optimism about my Ligue 1 recruits, but I can't sort of bring that optimism to you over Runarsson. And I'm not saying he's going to be hopeless or a waste of time, but I can't say this guy is going to be the future of Arsenal, goalkeeping. Yeah,
I mean, look, if Leno is the established first choice, which I think is clear, when Arsenal are looking to do things in the transfer market, it wouldn't have made a great deal of sense to bring in £20 million that you weren't necessarily expecting for Emi Martinez, and then spend a significant chunk of that on another goalkeeper, when there are other positions to be filled or strengthened. So I suppose in that sense, it makes some kind of logical sense, from a financial point of view at least.
Yeah, and look, he is an international goalkeeper. He's at an age where he should, sort of at 25, be developing in the next 2 or 3 years towards his peak, and he'll get football, I assume, whether it's Europa League or FA Cup or Carabao Cup. So we're going to get a chance to see what he's made of, and I guess he's going to be chomping at the bit, like I say, because he hasn't played much for the last year or so. So we'll have to watch this space, I think.
One of the things that Arsenal might want to do with some of the money that they got for Emi Martinez is invest in a new midfield player, and somebody from Liga who I imagine you're going to be a lot more positive about when you're talking about his potential and certainly his talent is Houssem Aouar, who plays with Lyon and who is reportedly one of our big targets. There were reports doing the rounds last night from Telefoot, I think it was, that Lyon were expecting an imminent €40 million bid from Arsenal. I'm always quite curious as to how stories like that develop. Like, who's told them that Arsenal are about to make a bid? I don't quite know what that is. But, what are your thoughts on Arsenal's pursuit of him and just how advanced it might be?
Yeah, you're right. He is definitely somebody I can get much more excited about. I absolutely love Houssem Aouar. He's a guy I've been watching for the last 3 or 4 years because even though he's young, he's been a Lyon regular, I think, for 4 seasons now. Listen, when the rumours started, or the first reports came out, I think it was still when Lyon were playing in the Champions League semi-finals, or they'd just gone out. And my first thought was, wow, but there's no way Arsenal will be able to get Houssem Aouar because Man City or Juventus or somebody, one of the big guns who are playing in the Champions League will come in for him. And at the moment, that hasn't happened. We know that this is a very, very difficult time for a lot of clubs financially. And if that means that it's opening an opportunity for Arsenal, I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I think, he's a wonderful footballer. The only thing I would say, the only sort of caveat is that 2 or 3 years ago, when Lyon beat Man City and Aouar just ran the show, I thought, this guy is going to be, the next Xavi or Iniesta. He just looks wonderful. And he hasn't quite kicked on. He hasn't quite made that step up yet. But perhaps he needs to leave Lyon, his hometown club, and leave Ligue 1 to do that. He definitely has the ability, I think, to become, one of the top sort of technical, creative midfield players in Europe. So listen, Arsenal are definitely trying to get him. I think a lot depends on whether a Champions League club comes in with a bigger bid or the same bid. Will Lyon accept 40 million? They were talking about 60 million euros. So it's going to be a question of whether other clubs come in and whether Lyon can accept an Arsenal offer. But there is some pressure from Lyon's point of view to sell, because they've said we will sell 2 of Memphis Depay, Houssem Aouar and Moussa Dembele, and the bids aren't flooding in at the moment.
Just very finally, there was talk about Matteo Guendouzi and PSG. We know that Guendouzi was offered to Lyon as part of a bid for Aouar, and I think Juninho said something along the lines of, well, no, he doesn't really fit our profile, perhaps based on some of the off-field issues that he's had at Arsenal. Is there any sign of anything happening from a Liga point of view? Is there interest in Guendouzi? Is it perhaps something that Lyon might revisit?
Good question. I don't think so. Because they seem to be pretty firm in that stance that he's not a player that they really want, and I'm not sure that is the area they need to be strengthening. Even if they are going to be selling Aouar, they've got some terrific young midfielders, and it's more in attack. I think that they're going to have to get 1 or 2 players in. For a French player, when they leave to the Premier League, it's very unusual. Unless they're 35 years of age, like sort of a Koscielny type, it's very unusual for them to come back to France unless they're going to Paris Saint-Germain. So, I think PSG would be the ideal solution, if you like. The one possible return to France, I think, would come from PSG. But I might be wrong. Perhaps Lyon are just haggling and they are actually interested in Guendouzi, but that's not my understanding of the situation. So, PSG are going to do deals in the coming weeks. They're trying to get some bargains, and their midfield is a big problem. So, I would say that would be one to watch more than Lyon.
Okay. All right. We'll keep our eyes peeled. Matt, thanks a million as always. Great to talk to you.
Lovely. Cheers, Andrew.
Thank you to Matt. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Spiro, at Matt Spiro. And if there's any more from France, and hopefully there will be between now and the end of the transfer window, we might talk to him again to chat about a potential new signing. Who knows? Time will tell. We'll also have to wait and see how this Icelandic goalkeeper guy works out for us. I mean, as I said to Matt, I think there is some logic in bringing in somebody who is, I guess, a definite number two, however you want to interpret that, rather than spending money we need to spend elsewhere on a goalkeeper. It just didn't really make that much sense, particularly in the current market. And we do have a couple of very young, up-and-coming goalkeepers who perhaps they don't want to impede too much by bringing in somebody who is perhaps going to get in their way. I don't know. Maybe I'm just looking for the real upside of this. I mean, does anybody really care who the number two goalkeeper is when he's sitting on the bench every week? Not really. The issue is, of course, if you need him. So, look, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. He is somebody, of course, that the goalkeeping coach knows very well. So maybe if things haven't gone as well for him at Dijon as he might have liked or they might have liked, perhaps it was just the wrong environment for him. Perhaps it just wasn't meant to be there. And Arsenal is the club where it'll all happen for him. He'll just sit on the bench for 38 Premier League games, play a couple of cup games, and that'll be that. And everyone will be just fine. Just fine. Right, now on the Arsecast for a bit more discussion on Emi Martinez, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Mikel Arteta, and what's going on at the club right now. I'm delighted to welcome back to the show the man from the East Lower, well, formerly of the East Lower. Nobody's of the East Lower these days, or the East Upper, or any lower, or any upper because of what's going on. Anyway, Jim, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm okay, trucking along, new season's begun, and here we are, just sailing on in towards the title, top of the league. All we got to do is hang on for another 37 games and we're champions. So I think it's looking good.
Yeah, there is a reason why they never, back in the days of print, they never used to put, print the title, the table until about 6 games in, did they?
That's right.
Sensible.
That's right. Yeah. It was the first few weeks for sure they didn't do that. So we did get off to a good start. We might talk about that in a moment, but I want to talk to you just a little bit about the two big stories of the week anyway. First and foremost are Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Emi Martinez. One is staying, one has gone. I think the first thing to touch on is, both of them played a big part in the success that we had towards the end of the season. When Leno got injured, we were all a bit afraid of what might happen or if we needed to go and buy a new goalkeeper, if he was going to be out long term, etc., etc. But Emi came in, he did really, really well. He was a sure, commanding presence in goal and at the back, and he helped us towards the FA Cup. And so, of course, did Aubameyang with the goals that he scored in the semi-final and the final. And it was quite interesting this week. I don't know if did you watch the video of Aubameyang and Ian Wright?
I did get dragged into it all in the end, thinking, I won't bother with any of this, and it's like, you're hooked, aren't you?
Yeah, and I thought it was a really nice video. I thought it was, I don't know, when Aubameyang was talking about giving Wrighty a statue and he was going, no, I was going, no, we should. He definitely needs one.
For sure.
Yeah, but he talked to the captain about the fans and the connection that he has with the fans. And, since he arrived, he scored lots of goals. And Emi Martinez, when he was saying goodbye, made a point of saying that, he could feel the love from the fans, which is, a nice thing to say, of course, and I'm sure it's very true. But it is a shame from a supporter's point of view and also from the point of view of the players that they've done these things. They've made these contributions without feeling that love from the fans in person, en masse, if you know what I mean. I know it's a consequence of where we are, but it does seem like a real shame for the fans and for the players.
It really does, and actually, I think I personally felt that thing. The FA Cup final was the thing where I really started noticing it, because that such a big percentage of a cup final is about being there in the atmosphere, and of course it wasn't. So that was difficult, and they all have had the same thing, because obviously they probably do dip in online, but you don't want to go too far online, what people are like. So I think they've handled it really well in the circumstances, and I think Martinez is going with the love of the fans, and saying all the right things. Some players, when they leave, they say the wrong things, and their sort of legacy, such as it is, gets tainted. But if you do it right, it just goes to show that they'll be well remembered forever.
It is sometimes difficult for a player who's really popular to leave a club without there being some kind of recriminations, because we like the player, we like what they do, we want them to stay. And in this case, I think a big part of why Emi left is because he wanted to play. He wanted to go somewhere. It wasn't specifically that he absolutely wanted to leave Arsenal. He was desperate to leave, but what he wanted from his career and what he could get from Arsenal at this moment in time were slightly at odds because of, the fact that Bernd Leno is viewed as the number one goalkeeper. And I think there is something nice about that in the world right now when everything is a bit divisive and things, there doesn't appear to be a lot of middle ground. I think it's nice that there has been this kind of understanding about the Emi Martinez situation. We recognise that he's a good player and he's done really well for us, and in an ideal world we'd want him to stay, and I think he too might want to stay in an ideal world, but there are circumstances, financial and his own ambitions, which have seen the deal go through, and good luck to him at Aston Villa. But it is kind of nice, a little reminder that this, transfers can be human too, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think he deserved it, and there was a difficult situation not just for him but for Lino as well, and you can't please them both. But I think most people realise the situation. He needs to play at his age, but it's quite interesting, isn't it? How someone like Martinez, who's sort of gone from zero to hero, and I don't mean zero in a negative way, but we didn't know much about him really at all. Suddenly kind of came on the scene and only played 15 games or something, and sort of almost elevated himself to sort of legendary status in such a short period of time. I can't think of many examples like that.
No. I mean, the other side of it, of course, is financial. And I remember at the time when that incident happened in the Brighton game, when Neil Maupay made that little shove on Leno, and we feared that he was going to be out for longer than he was anyway, because, the initial thought was maybe he'd done his cruciate and everything else. And, he was in some ways the villain of the piece. Of course he was the villain. He was the one who committed that needless foul. Fast forward a few months down the line, and that little shove has had massive effects on both Emi Martinez and Arsenal. The negative, of course, is that Leno was out, and it cost him a place in a cup final. But, that can happen to a player, that they get an injury. But Martinez, when he came in, he really boosted his own profile, and I think probably the options that he had available to him were much better than the ones he would have had before. And from an Arsenal point of view, you have a player who might have been worth maybe 3 million, 4 million, 5 million pounds. I think if you're really lucky to sell a number two goalkeeper who really hasn't played a great deal for you for that kind of money, I think you're doing very well. All of a sudden, we've got 20 million pounds for Emi Martinez. So Neil Maupay, while I'm not going to put him on my Christmas card list, has done wonders for Arsenal's bank balance, and also, for the career prospects of Emi Martinez. So, every cloud, he's the little wanker silver lining, if you like.
It is also the perfect illustration that so much in football happens by small moments of chance, really. People, then you either take your chance or you don't take your chance, or something happens and you go out of favour, or you lose a yard of pace because of one little thing. There's a lot of hard work involved, don't get me wrong, and it's mostly hard work, but there's also an element of luck, and it definitely was with him. Well,
yeah, certainly in terms of the circumstances, what he did when he came into the team, I don't think we can put that down to luck, but he really did seem like a guy who was absolutely determined to take his chance, didn't he?
Oh, so totally, yeah, absolutely, and he really did. He barely put a foot wrong. It was an incredible sort of half-season cameo from him, and And I really do wish him all the best. I really hope it works out for him, because it got to the point with having played only 15, 20 games for us, whatever it was, that we were talking about whether it was he or Lino that we should let go, and that just shows what an impact he made.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Aubameyang, the captain, he's staying. He signed a new contract, which isn't really a surprise. We sort of knew it was coming. Have you been at all surprised by the impact he has had since he arrived, in the January of 2018 from Borussia Dortmund? There were stories, and I think they did him a disservice really about his attitude and perhaps that he was a difficult kind of a character. And I think, in some ways that was perhaps down to the fact that he felt that his time at Dortmund was coming to an end. But in terms of what he's produced on the pitch and the kind of character he has shown throughout his time at the club, we haven't seen anything to back up some of the off-field difficulties that Dortmund might have had because of the circumstances.
No, and if anything, it's been the opposite. He's been the model pro and the kind of guy you build your team around. And actually, I think the thing is, he said in his video about how he feels at home and he feels his family. You could argue on the one hand it's a little bit of nice kind of marketing going there, but it really felt like it came from the heart, and that he really does feel like it's his place. And so we knew he was good when he signed, and I don't think any of us really knew how good and how much of a good influence he'd be. So like you say, we all kind of knew it was coming, but we really, really needed it to happen. I know we're paying him a lot of money, but he scored such a huge number of our goals last year, and without him, I dread to think where we would have come.
Yeah, me too. What about some of the concerns that people might have about a player of 31 getting a big long-term deal? People point to Mesut Ozil's contract extension just a couple of weeks after Aubameyang signed, or maybe it was a little bit shorter than that, and what happened in terms of Ozil's productivity after that. I know there were more than the bank balance or the wage packet that he was getting, but it would give you, certainly if you were a club like Arsenal, it might give you pause for thought in terms of making that kind of investment in a player of Aubameyang's age. And he was certainly older than Ozil when Ozil signed his deal. Was that something that ever really concerned you, or was it simply a case of, well, look, this guy is so hugely important that the financial output we'd have to make to replace him just doesn't tally up when you consider even when you take into account what we're going to be paying him?
That's it. I think ultimately to get somebody who's going to score you 25 goals a season, you'd need to spend 70, 80 million pounds and wages of comparable to what he's probably earning now. And so I think it's a risk that they had to take. And I think there's always an element of risk, and he might physically decline, you might get injured, all those kind of things. But I do think the Mesut Ozil case, it feels to me like a bit of an outlier. It doesn't happen that often where things go sour so quickly after signing a new contract. But so I'm not too worried about it. And I think also in international, in the football around the world now, you've got options like China and MLS, and so I think there will still be some good options should it end a little bit earlier than the contract. But yeah, Mesut Ozil is the case. Is the case that you wouldn't want to have repeated, but I don't think it will in this case.
What about his role as captain? A sort of unlikely captain, and he was thrust into it a little bit because of what happened with Granit Xhaka. He isn't the archetypal chest-thumping captain. Xhaka, I would say, is probably what you might consider the more traditional leader, the more traditional captain, a sensible guy, for the most part, experienced, relishes that kind of leadership and responsibility, even if it didn't last too long for him at Arsenal because of all the things that went on at that time that we don't need to go on about. But, there are people who talk about, your captains who bellow and shout and organize and cajole and they're leaders of men, but there are others who literally lead by example, by what they do on the pitch. And, I can't help but think about what he did towards the end of the season in the semi-final and the final, when we needed somebody to demonstrate their quality and their capability on the pitch. He was the guy who stepped up.
He was, and I think the leading by example is exactly the kind of the reason why he is captain, and also that kind of captain that you're talking about, the kind of chest thumping, bossing around. Yeah, I think those kind of players have disappeared slightly anyway.
Yeah.
The kind of the Tony Adams of this world. You don't get many of those for whatever reason, societal or whatever it might be. But you don't get many of those now, and I think. So he's just showing leadership in the way that modern footballers tend to do it, which I think is great.
What do you think the impact is going to be on the squad because of his new contract? I suppose it's a big boost for them as much as us as fans. Of course, it's a very positive thing for us. I think it's a very positive thing for the club and for Mikel Arteta, who was very clear about what he wanted. But the squad themselves, when they go into a new season, if there are doubts, if there are some worries over a really, really important player, when his future is decided, I think it gives them a little shot of confidence too.
Definitely, you want to know that the guy who's the absolute stardust in the team wants to stay, and comes out and says the same things he says. So it will be really, really helpful and also for the young guys, who look up to him. So I think it's always good when you get a player like that signs on for a bit longer, because he, without Ozil, who, whatever you think of him, he was a kind of stardust player. Aubameyang is the man. He's the guy that everybody in world football knows. So it is a massive boost for future, for signing future players and also for goals. So it's a big deal. Yeah, it's a huge deal. And I don't think you can underestimate how important it is, which is probably why they went to town on the whole announcement.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, I suppose, is that as fans, we are looking for positives, and we're at that stage of a season, aren't we, where, it's just begun. We've won the FA Cup. We've signed a couple of players. The first game went well. So we're looking for all the positives, and I think that's a nice place to be in. We started maybe last season in a similar mindset, looking for positives because of what felt like a good transfer window with Pepe coming in and everything else. And, it didn't turn out to be that. So let's enjoy this while it lasts. But one of the things that Aubameyang talked about was a conversation that he had with Mikel Arteta about his own status, where he, I think the word was legacy, and what your legacy is going to be at the football club. And that's something that resonated with him. But he also talked about what Arteta's vision for the club was. He said something along the lines of, he sold me on the future of the club, something like that. Mm-hmm. So, when you are a 31-year-old player, when you still, despite the fact that the COVID situation has complicated the transfer market for big clubs, and I think, without COVID, it might have been more difficult for us to hang on to him because he would have had more options. But I do, from what we've read, believe that there were offers for him, fairly significant offers that he's turned down. When you want to win things, when you want to end your career with some trophies and titles and those things, it's a big consideration when you think about where the last contract in your career is going to be. So are you enthused or encouraged? And I don't simply mean by, the idea of more players coming in, because I really do feel like you don't sign, if you're Aubameyang, you don't sign unless you get some kind of assurance from the club about what they want to do and how they want to build the team and improve the team. And I'm not saying they sat down and told them we're going to sign this player, this player, this player, and that player. But, more broadly, the fact that Aubameyang feels like Arsenal is the place to spend the last years or the last prime years of his career, based on what he's heard from Arteta, based on, what he's seen from Arteta, and, whatever assurances or whatever information he might have about what we might do. Are you encouraged by that? Is that another level of things that we can be optimistic about?
Well, I think, he's clearly encouraged by it, but we all are, because I think I think you're saying, well, maybe COVID was one of the things that helped him stay. I think the biggest thing is Arteta. I think that's the thing that's really, really helped, because it's been almost universally popular with the sort of blip of the Europa League. It's been a really exciting time to see things start to take shape, and he will have sensed that more than anyone. So, like you say, he probably doesn't have to be promised that we're going to sign X, Y, and Z, but I think he can sense the general direction and the sort of sense of togetherness and vision that Arteta clearly has. And so, that would be really exciting. And I think the whole thing about legacy, I find it absolutely fascinating, because it's really hard to measure legacy. And to say that I want to stay here to be a legend and to create a legacy is quite an interesting take on it, I think, because normally it's people would just say, they kind of trot out, I want to win titles, and maybe he's just being realistic. But I think it's fascinating to think that actually what I really want to do here is, yes, I want success, but actually I want to be known, I want to be known as X. And I think I just find that quite heartwarming, but also quite an interesting, from a sort of human perspective.
Where do you think that comes from exactly? Because it is, like you say, it's easy for them to say, I want to win things with this club and I can kiss the badge and tap the badge when I score a goal and what have you. But I guess you don't say something like that unless you genuinely feel it. So whatever kind of, I don't want to use the word home or family or whatever it is, they sound a little bit too cheesy, but at the same time, those are words that are thrown around, like Arsenal is your home or Arsenal are your family, things like that. It does perhaps feel like he really senses that or feels that in terms of the connection he has with the club, the fans. And I do think in a big way, winning something at the end of this season played a part.
Oh, no doubt. It would have really helped. And it's always nice to win something, even though without fans. But I think he's always loved playing here. There's obviously something about the club and about the fans and about London that he really, really loves. So that's a big part of it. And maybe there's an element of realism that, to say, let's win the league next year. Let's be honest, it's unlikely. But I do think it really, like you say, I don't think he's faking it. I think he really means it, and I think it's just lovely that he feels that way, and that that he feels so comfortable that was in the end quite a big factor in him signing on. So I think that's great, and like you say, for other players as well, they'll look at that and think that can only be a positive thing. In terms of team building and just the kind of feeling behind the scenes, it must be really, really positive.
It is one of everyone. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things, in football that you can't measure in any significant way. Things like belief and confidence and trust in what's happening at a club and where you can actually go and what you might be able to do under a particular manager. But it does feel like the Arsenal squad, the players that we have right now, the majority of them anyway, maybe there are one or two doubters or disbelievers or something else, but they do seem to believe in Mikel Arteta and what he wants them to do and how he wants them to do it. And leading the team and leading those players to a trophy, adding to their medals, regardless of how many they have or don't have. Some of them, it's their first time winning anything. It really does strengthen that in terms of, what it might create and the kind of atmosphere and the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, culture that he is and has said he wants to create at the club.
And he's done it in pretty quick order as well.
Yeah.
I did. When he was announced, Arteta, and I felt the same when it was between. Well, when the first time around, when Emery got the job, I felt the same. I thought it was too soon for Arteta, and even now, I thought, I can't think of many examples apart from if you're managing Real Madrid or Barcelona, where a complete rookie comes into a big club and succeeds. It makes it that much harder. But he's only been here 6 months. He's already won a trophy, and the signs are all positive. I'm sure there'll be some bumps in the road, but to have done all that during a pandemic, and I know you've talked about this before as well, but on the pod, but makes it doubly impressive, really.
What about Arteta then, and the recent change in his title from head coach to manager, and this kind of restructuring of the restructure? So the post-Wenger thing didn't work, or it got us to a point where we needed to do something different. In this so-called modern structure with the The three people that we had in charge with a head coach, didn't really play out as well as they might have liked. And we've sort of, I don't mean to say gone backwards, but we've fallen perhaps into something that is a little more comfortable in terms of English football, where you have one guy who is the manager rather than the head coach. And that's Arteta. I mean, I think I said this to James on Monday, is that, he's acted since he came in like a manager, or somebody with the authority of a manager, in terms of, his focus wasn't just on what the team did. He said he wanted to make everything better, everything at the club, from top to bottom, and all the staff and everything else. So it's not really a surprise that it's happened, but it does sort of give him an official authority, if you like, because of that role.
Yeah, and it feels like it brings him slightly closer to the executive level, which can only be a good thing. It means that they trust him and he trusts them. So I think that's a really positive thing. He wants to change the culture of the club, and it's not just about buying and selling players or coaching players. There's a lot more to it than that. So I think it's well deserved. It is just a name at the end of the day, but I think it wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been an awful lot of positives going on, not just the ones that we've seen, but the ones behind the scenes. So I think the club is still finding its way in terms of its post-Wenger structure. There'll probably be a few ups and downs to come, but which is no great surprise. But it does feel like it's slightly settling down a bit now, in a good way.
Couple of quick ones just to finish. I asked this on the podcast last week, but just realistically, what would you envisage as a good season for Arsenal between now and May?
I think in terms of league position, I think just an improvement would be really good, and in a sense of direction, positive direction. I don't mean seventh. I don't think that would be a massive improvement. But I think by saying that, and I think most people would say have the same kind of caveat, is that to get to top four is not impossible. I really don't think it is impossible, but I think it's still quite tough with the kind of with the teams out there and the spending that they've made, and the level of the top two. So I think that is the goal, where if we fall slightly short, but we give it a really good go, so if we came fifth or sixth, but we really nearly did it, I'd say that's incredibly positive, and obviously a run in the cup. But I just think improving and going in the right direction and starting this kind of structure that we're already seeing in place, that people are buying into, and playing a bit of better football, all these things combined would say that's a positive season. And I think maybe top four is, whilst it's the goal and it's achievable, it might be just a little bit beyond us this year.
And finally, as a season ticket holder and as somebody who's been a season ticket holder for a long time, we all understand why fans aren't in stadiums anymore, and it might be a little bit later than we think before fans get back in there. Is it affecting, I don't want to say your relationship with the club or the team or anything like that, but has this sort of enforced absence change your perspective in any way, or?
I think so. I think it has a bit, but I also think you could almost have a whole podcast on this. I think as you get older, it certainly has with me. I still love it, and I love it tons, but I'm not quite so invested in it as I was in my mid-20s. I don't, if we lose, I don't kind of mope around for the weekend, which I used to. So I think you do get a little bit more detached from it, and things come into focus a bit more as you get older anyway. But I find that, for me, half the fun, if not more than half the fun, is just the going and meeting my friends, and just the routine of it and the atmosphere and all that kind of thing, which is not there at the moment. So I think that it does detract a bit from what's happening. And I know you said you like to watch the football without the crowd noise, but I can't. To me, it's like, it doesn't feel right at all. And I know it's still fake with the crowd noise, but without the crowd noise, it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like anything other than a training game. So it's definitely takes a little bit of a leap of, once you get into the game, you watch it and it's still just as exciting, or nearly as exciting. But I definitely have been a bit less into it. As plus the fact the summer was short. The season went on for ages, and then there was a short break, and so it's kind of hard. Some of those routines have gone out the window. So I definitely haven't been following it quite as much as I might otherwise have done. But I feel that's coming back now, and with now that it's actually started. What about you? I mean, you're writing about it every day and doing podcasts twice a week. Have you found that at all?
I think the difference for me is, of course, because I'm not there and my routine isn't really around going to the game, every second week or whatever it might be at the Emirates. When I get over for a game like you, it's brilliant because there's the social aspect to it, and that's certainly something I've missed. And cup final and everything else was kind of a wrench in terms of the traditions that you might have and the things that you do around that day and everything else. But I just, from my point of view, the routine isn't that different. I still watch the games and I still write the blog and do all the stuff and what have you. But I really do feel like it is missing something really fundamental. And I don't just mean Arsenal. I mean, fans in the stadiums up and down the Premier League and, whatever other football you might watch. And for me, that's why I can't do the crowd noise. I just can't. I can't do it because I know it's too fake for me. And there's a delay in the noises, and I know they're trying to do, like, somebody misses a shot and they're trying to do like a ooh from the crowd, but it's just a little bit too late and it's not quite the right noise. And so that's, for me, to sort of ground it in reality, I have to do just the stadium noise. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah,
similar, different, completely opposite sort of view on it, but it's been something I've always had switched on.
I think it might just apply to Arsenal games, though. I'm not sure. I think when I've been sort of half watching football on, the TV, if you might be sitting there's a game on, you're doing something on your phone or your laptop or whatever it might be. I think if, the crowd noise is on there, it's sort of like a comforting background noise, and it kind of tells you when you're supposed to look up and see what's going on. So maybe it's just an Arsenal thing. Maybe I just really like listening to Mikel Arteta shouting at players, from the sideline and telling them where to be and when to be there and how to do it. And, I think
maybe you're just missing the kind of tuts and the general sense of apathy that under the Emery era, you're just missing that kind of negative vibe. That's what it is.
Definitely not missing that. I can tell you that for sure. All right. Well, look, Jim, we'll leave it there. Good to talk to you again.
You too.
And look, keep up the great work on the blog.
All right.
Yeah. And we'll catch you soon.
All right. Cheers. Nice to speak.
That was the man from East Lower. You can follow him on Twitter at East Lower, and his blog is in need of an injection of new hashtag content, but sometimes he does stuff at eastlower.co.uk, and when he does, it's always worth reading. Right, that's just about that. At the time of recording, we don't really have any team news. There's nothing official anyway, even if there were some pictures of David Luiz back in training, so perhaps that makes you feel good, perhaps it does not. That's a personal thing, but I figure the more fit and healthy players we have available to us, the better. At any point during the season, and that includes now. So we'll have to wait and see what Mikel Arteta is going to do with his team for the game against West Ham on Saturday. There is, if I recall correctly, also a midweek game next week, Carabao Cup game against Leicester. And after that, there's a trip to Anfield. So I suspect we're going to see some of the fringe young players playing in the Carabao Cup, because we're not going to risk the best players before we go to Anfield, that's for sure. So I reckon we'll see a pretty strong team against West Ham. I think it'll be something very, very similar to the team we saw against Fulham, both in terms of personnel and also system. And hopefully we can do something similar in terms of performance, because there was plenty of positives at Craven Cottage, and hopefully the first home game of the season we can replicate that in some way, or at least replicate the amount of points we take from the game however we take them. For those of you on Patreon, there is a Tactics podcast out. We're going to be doing this once a month at least, myself and Lewis Ambrose. So if you want to check that out, you can do that right now. It's on your Patreon feed. If you want to join the Patreon, you can. It's $5 a month. You get access to podcasts like that. All the Arsecasts are ad-free. There There are YouTube live streams, Discord chat, and more. £5 a month, patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, let's leave it there for this particular episode. As ever, thank you very much indeed for listening, for being here, for subscribing. As always, it's hugely appreciated. Hope you enjoyed the show. Wherever you are, take care, wash your hands, stay safe, stay well. Keep fingers crossed for the weekend that we can take those 3 points at the ridiculous time of 8 o'clock or, coming up to 10 o'clock on Saturday night when the game is going to be over. And we can chat about it on Monday, of course, in the Arsecast Extra with James. Until then, take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye. Welcome back to Holy God FM. Normally at this time I would be banging out the cracking tunes. Hits from the 80s you thought you'd forgotten, but the minute they come on you go, I remember that one now. I had the 12-inch with the extra long remix, 3 minutes of which was just drum beats, because that's what remixes were in the 80s. Today, though, with the world in the state that it's in, we've got to focus on what's important. And it's not the 9-minute Shep Pettibone version of Looking for Linda by Hue and Cry. We have to ask the Lord above to provide for us in this time of need. So please, follow me in this prayer as we beseech the good Lord to give us what we want. Our parte, who art in heaven, transfer heaven of course, hallowed be thy agent. Thy image rights come, thy deal be done, in the Premier League as it is in Ligue 1. Give us this day our daily bread, the bread of transfer news that we scoff so lustily. And forgive us our tapping up, as we forgive those who tap up against us. And lead us not into temptation by way of brown envelopes filled with cash, but deliver us from evil. Jose Mourinho, of course. Amen. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, join me for a conversation with Christian rap's latest star, MC Deuteronomy.